I'm Russell Leidick, and you are watching the Dangerous Fishbowl channel. I've always been enthralled with the prospect of finding rare species of fish or plants within the isolated confines of a sinkhole. I explored this theme previously in Killifish Hollow, which is appropriate because killifish tend to reside in such circumstances. This surely explains their vast biodiversity compared to the tetras you see here. Nevertheless, there are surely isolated parts of the Amazon, perhaps cut off from the rivers during periods of drought, in which similar such microcosms briefly flourish. Speaking of which, the entire Amazon suffered an intense drought in 2023, endangering not only the ecosystem itself, but also all of the people who depend upon it for their livelihoods. This tragedy, and it is a tragedy, serves to remind us of the fragile web of life that sustains us. Indeed, this is what I most love about flourishing fish bowls. They're like a portal into the unpolluted world of the past, reminding us that this place really was paradise, and here and there still is. One day, they might be our only evidence that such a world ever existed at all. And so it is with Sinkhole Quartet, which sits in silent splendor under a mere 7 watts of 6500 Kelvin lighting. Speaking of lighting, I apologize if the colors are slightly washed out. That's due to a camera issue unique to this one video. I could have corrected it, but not without causing other problems, so it is what it is. Anyway, we can imagine that this is a sinkhole of such volume as to impress a killifish, although tetras might be a bit less enthused. Nevertheless, the maximum circumference is about 94 centimeters, affording plenty of space for exercise. The quartet aspect refers to the 4 species of tetra who live here, namely cardinals, black neons, glow lights, and serpes. Their distinct schooling behaviors might as well represent 4 different musical instruments. I should also mention the shrimp who perform their janitorial duties behind the scenes. And finally, there are 2 very shy coolie loaches meandering around the bottom. Look over on the left. There! Did you see him at the end of the previous segment? Anyhow, the vase itself was purchased from JJ Glass in Bangkok. Its neck fits perfectly into the end of an IKEA Arad lamp. I can't tell you what a relief it is to see a fishbowl illuminating my living room without getting my eyes blasted by white LEDs. The camera position somewhat distorts the shape. The neck is only 13 centimeters wide, whereas the maximum diameter and the height are both around 30 centimeters. The bottom is too narrow to work with, so I added enough gravel to lift the entire composition to a wider base diameter. And for its part, the substrate is playground sand. I wouldn't advise using finer sand because it tends to create anaerobic pockets. I did also enrich the bottom layer with organic potting soil, which was then covered with a layer of plain sand in order to prevent the soil from leaching into the water column. This is one distinction with all the Wallstead tanks I've seen, in which the soil has been left exposed. Now, I don't know if that was in the original specification, but I see it all the time, and it tends to cloud the water, which is why I would recommend against it. Anyway, I was lucky enough to find a flexible root network, which, after removing all the bark and debris, I was able to twist around the inner surface of the vase. It's held in place by the flat outer circumference of the top of the vase in conjunction with the tension in the roots themselves. The water does get tinted with tannins after a few weeks, but I have to trim the plants anyway, so I change the water at the same time. And by the way, the hardness runs about 100 to 130 total dissolved solids, depending on the season. I don't use a heater because the water temperature never gets much below 24 Celsius. And by the way, I always try to keep my fishbowl away from direct sunlight, especially when it's already in close proximity to a light source and all of its associated heat. For just that reason, I also maintain a small air gap between the lampshade and the neck of the vase. And most importantly, as you can see, I've made sure to maximize the water surface area in order to ensure sufficient gas exchange. That's why the water line is far below the neck. Now, if you're wondering, my pH runs a bit alkaline, probably mid-7s. I don't add CO2 or liquid fertilizer or have any sort of mechanical filtration, but nevertheless, my phosphates are low enough that I don't have much of an algae problem beyond what little hair algae you can see on the bottom. Those are baby tears, by the way. Cryptocornes are populating most of the back area, with Potamogeton lucens off to the side. There's also a tiny Java fern on top of the knot in the driftwood. I usually feed my fish dried bloodworms. I have to break them up a bit for the little guys. I also provide dry pellets, which are vital for my coolie loaches when they can't find any snails to eat, but I don't provide pellets on more than 2 days per week because they contain concentrated phosphates that stimulate algae growth. And with that, I hope Sinkhole Quartet has inspired your aquascaping imagination and perhaps just slightly strengthened your bond with the jungle. Enjoy, and see the YouTube description for more details as well as still photos when they're available.